We begin this lecture on books 11 and 12 of the Odyssey, and we are going to follow Odysseus as he is making his way to the underworld, which is going to be the low point, figuratively and literally, of his journey home. Every hero can be followed basically on what is known as the epic hero cycle. The hero of the story is charged with a quest. They must go on a journey. They encounter many supernatural creatures. There are many tests that they must accomplish, basically tasks. Then they will experience the low point, and then after that's done, there is a resurrection, and then restitution is made. And so that's a way in which you can really follow and track which character, if there is any discrepancy, that is the true character of the story. And that is where we're going to encounter Odysseus in these next two books, is as he goes to the underworld. As we look at book 11, there are a few new characters that we encounter. And again, in every book, there are many new characters, but these are just some of the ones that you can take note of. Tiresias is the prophet of Thebes who retained his prescience after death, meaning he was a seer who had foreknowledge of what was going to happen before it took place. And then he also retains this after he is in the underworld. So Odysseus is instructed to go see Tiresias, and that he is going to basically help him, give him the task, the quest to do what he has to do to get home. While he is in the underworld, Odysseus encounters his mother Anticlea, who has already passed away. She took her own life out of desperation and worry and anxiety, basically, because she got tired of waiting for Odysseus to come home, and she literally could not take it anymore. So Odysseus was rather shocked to see his mother there. As he also makes his way through the underworld, we encounter the three of the top Greek warriors that he fought with at the Trojan War. We are familiar with Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek forces at Troy; Achilles, who was known as the greatest war hero of the Trojan War and was the hero of the Iliad that we just read; and then Telamonian Ajax, or is also known as the Great Ajax, and he was a Greek war hero as well. So when Odysseus encounters these characters, he sees them in a very different light, and he is shocked to see these characters already here. Agamemnon, as we discussed, was murdered by his wife Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus. What was terrible, it is terrible that he died, but what was even more terrible is that he made it through the entire Trojan War, did not die, but then comes home to what should have been a happy homecoming, and he's murdered there. In his own home. And then Achilles, we get that he has died. We don't get any of this information within the Iliad, but Achilles, if you remember, in the Iliad, he had the choice to he could live a much longer life, but he would not be noted for fame, and his name would soon die out after a few generations. Or he could go out in a blaze of glory and be remembered for basically all eternity, and that was what he chose. But after he's done that, he has died an early death, and now he is in the underworld and realizes maybe that was not the best choice that I should have made, because I don't get to keep living. And he sees somewhat that his pride got in the way of what his true basically life mission should have been. And then Ajax, we also see he encounters him because he has died. So as he goes to the underworld, he is instructed that he must go there. He must complete certain tasks. He encounters one of his men, Elpenor, and he also encounters Tiresias, we said, and his mother Anticlea. Elpenor, as we've discussed before, was one of the men who fell off the balcony at Circe's palace and was instructed Odysseus to please go back and bury my body in the correct fashion, so that I am not doomed to wander and I can cross over the river Styx that runs through the underworld and go to my final resting place. Also, Odysseus catalogs all of the people that he meets, and there are quite a few characters that he meets, and this was important. Any kind of cataloging that is typical of epic narratives, but it is a way. There are different clans, different people, different stories. That would have been very familiar to not just the readers, but more so to the listeners of that time. So any kind of cataloging is just typical of epic narratives, and it also it draws the reader in, and it serves to evoke a sense of nationality, of familiarity with the reader, and it is something that the author is supposed to do in keeping with this type of work. As Odysseus is, keep in mind, he's telling all of this in retrospect, all of his journey, and that he's telling all this to King Alcinous and Arete, and that is a device that is used so that the reader can get the backstory. Keep that in mind. And Odysseus is getting very tired of telling this story of what all goes on, and they encourage him to continue on with his story, and he agrees to do so, and then he gives them the story of Agamemnon, Achilles, and Ajax. Something with book 11, you can also see that Virgil and Dante follow Homer's style. Virgil is going to give a similar account of Aeneas's travels to the underworld, and then Dante, when he wrote the Inferno, based the whole premise of his book on the underworld. Homer includes many shorter stories in the middle of his narrative, and that is something that the other authors are going to mimic as well. Agamemnon, Ajax, and Achilles are a strong link to the Iliad. And so that is something that really ties these two books together and has really made critics and other experts of this time period really solidify their belief in that Homer did indeed write the Iliad and the Odyssey as well, even though they are somewhat the voice is somewhat different. One has a different focus than the other, but there are so many strong ties that connect these two books together. There are two families that we have discussed before, and we have mentioned this theme, and this is something that is, again, reiterated in this book. You can compare the family unit of Odysseus, Penelope, and Telemachus, and Odysseus's eventual homecoming. Penelope has been saving herself for Odysseus. She is not going to take up with any of the suitors. She is continuing with this hope that he is still alive. Telemachus is out in search for his father, but it is contrasted to that of Agamemnon, Clytemnestra, and Orestes. Agamemnon, again, the Greek warrior, fought at Troy, comes home, is killed by Clytemnestra, his wife, and her lover Aegisthus, and then the son Orestes turns around and kills his mother and her boyfriend. So you can really contrast and build upon this theme of faithfulness or fidelity versus infidelity, and the theme of one strong family unit versus the other. So that is really something to look closely at, and it is really manifested within this book. In book 12, we encounter Scylla, who is the horrendous monster with 6 heads on elongated necks, Charybdis, a terrible creature that takes the form of a devouring whirlpool, and then Helios, the god of the sun. And in this book, there is really, what is really manifested is the theme of duty first. Odysseus is given a quest. He's got to make it home, and he knows, and this comes from Tiresias that he just encountered in the underworld. He must, if he goes by one, he's got to go by Scylla and Charybdis. And if he goes one way, he loses some of his men. If he goes another way, he loses all of his men. And so he is literally caught between a rock and a hard place. There is no easy answer. And in the end, he is going to come out alone, shipwrecked. And that is when we finally are going to encounter him traveling solely by himself. So with the idea and the choice of encountering Scylla and Charybdis, he does not tell his men because there's nothing he can do, and he is suffering from extensive guilt. It was not an easy decision to make. He is greatly distressed, but there is nothing that he can do. And one of Poseidon's great curses that he has inflicted upon Odysseus is that Poseidon's, since the whole shakedown with the Cyclops, his son, gave the curse that, yes, if my wish is for you not to make it home to Ithaca, but if you do, you will be an old man who has lost everything. And that is what we are seeing with Odysseus, someone who is growing older. He has lost everything by the time he washes up on the shores of uh, the Phaeacians with Alcinous, Arete, and Nausicaa, and they are going to ultimately help him home. So while this is basically a curse, a prophecy that is coming to pass, and it is on the back of already the guilt and distress that Odysseus has felt.